This episode is brought to you by Absolute Landscapes. Absolute Landscapes is a landscape maintenance company that focuses heavily on commercial property maintenance. Call today for information about the services we provide and how we can best help you. 803 427 5944.
Sound good. Everything looks good. So, if you want to introduce yourself and just kind of say who you are, preface the conversation, and we'll dive in.
All right. So I'm Rachel Fowler. I am a lot of different things. I am an American living in London. I am a filmmaker. I am a writer, director. I'm an actor. But the core of what I think we're going to talk about today is my work as a grief and loss coach. So I came to this being a grief and loss coach during COVID, actually, when I realized that all of my creative work was about grief and that I was really interested in what it is and how we deal with it and how maybe we could make things a little bit better for those of us who are grieving. So that's me.
Yeah, you're right. There's a lot going on there. Yeah. But I don't know. I just feel like grief is just one of those things. I feel like everybody is just affected differently, and it's like, for a lot of people, losing a loved one is like the most traumatic thing they experience in their life. And so I can't imagine, but it's like, it just seems like there's a spectrum, I feel like, with how people handle it and how people get over it. And like the best way I don't know if there's there's probably not like a cookie cutter way to handle. I mean, I guess it depends on the person, I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting. There are some universalities to grief because we're all human. Mm-hmm. And there is a neurological effect that grief has on us and a physiological effect that is pretty much the same, across a broad spectrum. But you're right. Grief is very unique because everybody's relationship to the person is unique. Mm-hmm. Right. So my father died 13 years ago, and my grief presented differently than my sister's grief, than my mother's grief, because their relationship to my father was their own. It was their own unique relationship. And so you're going to grieve different things. You're going to miss different things. You're going to want to bring different things forward, depending. It is it is wildly unique. Very, very much a spectrum. Actually, rather than thinking of it as a spectrum, maybe we could think of it as a circle. Mm-hmm. Right? Because a spectrum it's sort of like that bell curve. There's the low end and then the high end and whatnot.
Right.
But think of it as a circle, and that there are different ebbs and flows throughout that, depending on the relationship, etc. For some people, it's going to be, maybe they've got a complicated relationship with the person who's died, and they have to work through some anger or work through some things that never got said or never got resolved. And others don't have that, right? So maybe the anger part of that might not show up. Yeah.
Yeah. As if it wasn't complicated enough, then you have situations where, maybe things weren't resolved or things weren't said, or, I'm sure there's those situations where a person, maybe they felt like they should have done something while the person was still here or whatever. I mean, there's so many different things that I feel like just complicates this thing. So
yeah,
I don't even know where to begin with this, because it's like there's so much going on. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say it's really interesting because I've actually had one of my first clients when I started this work 4 years ago was a woman who's a dear friend of mine. And her husband was diagnosed with Lewy bodies dementia. So she was like, I am deep in grief because even though his physical body is still here, the essence of who he is disappearing every day. Did you hear that? I got the neighbors going, yay.
It was like very bad timing, but yeah, I heard it. It's all
Um,
good.
it's all good. Yeah, I got the window open.
No,
Um,
yeah.
so she came to me because, like I said, she said the essence of who he is disappearing in front of my eyes, and I'm already grieving, even though his physical body is here.
Mhm.
And it's a weird liminal space to be in. It's a very, I think a lot of people feel that too when they've got a terminally ill loved one, that they know their time with them is limited. So, how do you start to process the grief? How do you start to support yourself, allow yourself to feel all of the things that you're feeling when their physical body is still here? And there's something that feels like if you start the grieving process, that maybe you're going to manifest a death earlier, and you're not going to, it's just a question of allowing yourself the grace and kindness to just feel whatever it is that you're feeling, and have the courage while they're still there, and maybe while they can still understand you, to say whatever it is that you want to say, whatever it is you want them to know.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point, because I don't know if we talked about this last time we talked. My mom passed away when I was 25, and it was a
Yeah,
sudden and tragic thing. But it's like, I know people who have lost loved ones, and it's like these people, because I want to be respectful when I say this, but like these people, they go to a cemetery, and like that, they feel like they're visiting with that person. They feel like uh, the burial site of this person is like a connection for them. But like I've never really felt that that I think to the degree that other people do at a cemetery. Because me, I feel like, I'm a person who believes that we have a soul. There's something that embodies us within inside of us that's much higher than us. And so, it's for me, it's things like I'll never forget when she passed away at the cemetery, like shortly after the funeral. There was like a rainbow off in the distance, and it's just like that was the kind of thing that I feel that connection. I don't feel so. It's like that. It's like that. I don't know how else to say it other than that connection to the physical representation of that person. I feel like is what a lot of us get attached to. And I mean, either way, if it's the physical attraction or attachment, or if it's the spiritual attachment, either way, you feel like that is not here anymore. But I don't know, maybe it could possibly be the people that are not so much attracted to the cemetery or to the physical space. Maybe that's a defense mechanism to say, oh well, it's this person's always with me type thing. But I don't know. I don't know if that's something you see common, that a lot of people don't really, go to a cemetery to visit. They just don't feel that connection there. I don't really know what I'm trying to ask here, but
Yeah, I think it depends on the person, really. I think it depends also on their upbringing. What are the cultural norms for them as well?
hmm,
For instance, my father and my nephew were both cremated, and they're buried in a columbarium in a church in Dunwoody, Georgia, where my mother lives. And it was the church that my mother still goes there.
mm-hmm,
And when I'm in town, I mean, I'm not a churchgoer. I do believe in God. I do believe in the spiritual world. I do believe we're all connected by something. But I go to church to visit Dad, to visit Ryan. However, I talk to my dad all the time. Like, I don't
mm-hmm,
actually need to be in the church to be in
right,
communion with him. Um, but some people find that act of going somewhere, it gives them a purpose, right?
mm-hmm,
And there's a ritual in it of going to the cemetery, visiting the grave, picking off the weeds, replacing the flowers and whatnot, that is sort of bringing their energy, and recalling, remembering, if you break
mm-hmm,
down remembering, you're remembering someone. So you're sort of bringing them back to life
mm,
briefly while you're thinking of them, while you're tending to the physical space where their physical body is now. Um, and I think those things can be really powerful and really healing, and really um, continuing that connection, right? That's the
mm-hmm.
big thing, is how do you keep that alive? that connection with your loved one. Like,
Well,
how
and I
do you
think,
do that? With your mother who died recently, how do you keep your relationship with her alive now?
well, and I think that's what I'm saying. I think the cemetery, like, I think it increases the severity of the separation because it's like you're going to a place where this person's the physical representation of this person is buried. Like like the way I see it is we all have a temporary vehicle basically that we're inhabiting. Like this is what we see right here
Your
is a
meat suit?
temporary thing. Like yeah, like this is not like a permanent, like this is a temporary thing. It's like it's like if you were to close your eyes and talk to a person, like the energetic feel that you feel, or like the uh just the general vibe, just the soul that inhabits the person. I think that's what the attraction is. But like, I don't know. To me, I don't know if it makes it more severe or makes it more limiting to think that like this burial site is the last destination. You know what I'm saying? I don't know how really to describe this. I've never tried.
Yeah, but I think that what you're saying though is like, this is temporary,
Right.
right? So that place is not the final destination. It's only the final destination for the temporary
This.
vehicle,
Right. Right. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So the communion, it's so interesting that this is where you wanted to go, because this is what my next film is about that I'm shooting in July. And it actually takes place in a cemetery. But it's about finding those ways where the spirits can commune, right? And if you feel like the cemetery is a place where you feel closer to the person that you've lost, the person who has died, then that can be a place of great comfort.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I think what you're saying is like, the cemetery is not the final destination for the spirit. It's just the final destination for the vehicle, the temporary vehicle.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And like I said, it's much more likely that I'll feel a connection, so to speak, if if it's like her birthday or Mother's Day, and there's like a I don't know, a dove flies by or something. Just the not to sound so cliche about it, but just the things that we all like. The rainbow after her funeral was a very the odds of that being a thing were like, I don't know. I think I have a picture of that somewhere. But no, it's just it's that. But and like I said, I don't think I'm the only. Well, I'm certainly not the only one that feels that way about that. And I guess it just depends on how the person. I guess the whole purpose of this, to say all this, is just to kind of build up the question of how do different people handle grief, and like how what am I trying to say here? I'm trying to get to a point where we can kind of distinguish the ways that different people can handle grief that's going to be better for them. Or I don't want to say the word excuse or try to make it better for yourself. Like, I don't think any of these things are an excuse, but just how can we help me out here? I need a life jacket. I'm drowning over here.
Yeah. So no, I get what you're saying. It's sort of like if you're somebody who's lost someone, right? And you are feeling overwhelmed by the emotion, by the brain fog, by the, oh my gosh, like the the bureaucracy around death as well, right? All of the estate, the will, the probate, are you going to bury? Are you going to cremate? How are you going to put together a service? Are you going to invite everybody? Do you have to make all of these phone calls? There's a lot of like activities that happen in the wake of somebody dying. I think that the big thing is like to be really, really gentle with yourself. There's a lot of myths around grief, I think, like I have to be strong for my children. I have to be strong. I can't let anybody know how I'm feeling. And actually, all you're doing is creating tension around something that's actually very natural, that's very human, and you're delaying the inevitable. And by delaying the inevitable, grief can start to feel really scary. You don't have to be strong. You've lost someone who meant something great to you, was a great, for instance, your mother, my father, it changes who you are. There's a huge identity shift when you lose someone. And that's sort of the transformational nature of it. And the only way to the other side is through.
Yeah.
So you
sure.
could keep busy and that'll distract you for a while, which can be useful. I'm not saying don't be busy, right?
Mhm.
But if you are keeping yourself busy to try not to feel your grief, eventually that's going to catch up to you. And then it could be scary,
Yeah. So I think what I'm kind of leading up to here is that if it, like, do you have siblings? I think you said you have siblings.
Yeah, I've got 2 sisters. I'm the middle kiddo.
So when your dad died, I'm assuming everybody had a kind of a different reaction, how they handled it differently. I mean, the reaction was the same, but I'm saying how everybody went through the process. Because I know with me and my siblings, it was like that. Everybody kind of had their own unique thing. But I think what I'm kind of leading up to here is that so somebody maybe going through this can understand is that it's okay to experience this thing in your own way. I think what I'm trying to get to
Yes.
here is that,
Yes.
yeah, if you have if a person passed away that you and somebody else were both simultaneously connected to, if they feel the connection in the cemetery but you don't, that's okay. And if you handle it a different
Yes.
way, that's okay. That's kind of what I'm trying to get to here is because I remember, man, I remember back, when this thing happened. Like I said, it was a very traumatic and sudden thing. But I remember, like, my 2 sisters and my brother, we all had a different way of dealing with this. And I think a lot of people are in this situation where they almost feel there's a sense of shame that they're handling it different from how people that are, related to them or whatever are handling this thing. Not saying that they care any less or that somebody cares any more or anything like that, but it's just these people are handling this thing differently. And I think it's important for people to understand that, like, there are going to be different ways that you handle this. Like, just because somebody else is, doing X, Y, Z and you're not, that does not mean that that's a bad thing, or at least that's
Yeah.
my thought process of it.
No, it absolutely. I think that the danger with comparing suffering is that somebody is going to feel discounted. Somebody is going to feel unseen, unheard. And it's a way that we, like you said, it brings up shame, it brings up guilt. I know when my older sister she went to a couple of grief groups shortly after her son died. And her son was 13 and he died of a drug overdose, was like, so there's already some shame around that.
Right.
But she was in this group. It was a group at her church, wonderful women. But one of the things that made her extremely uncomfortable was, a few of the women were like, well, I only lost my mother. You lost your son. Your grief is more important than mine. And she was like, or, that's the subtext. What you've gone through is far worse than what I've gone through. And that is not useful to anyone because everyone is entitled to grief. Everyone's grief matters. Everyone's story matters. Everyone's sorrow matters. And it's all, like you said at the very beginning, it's unique. It's all unique. And it's a disservice, not just to my sister. It's really a disservice to this woman who was like, well, I only lost my mother, and it's like, but I think that part of the problem with that comes from the fact that we've medicalized death so much that we no longer have a shared language around it. So, or a shared experience around it. So we no longer know what to say. And especially, I think, when you've lost a child, which, sort of goes against the grain of like what we would expect, number one. Or if you lose someone suddenly, traumatically, maybe like you and your siblings lost your mother, that can like really be jarring, and people just don't know. They just don't know how to handle it. So they think that it's well intentioned, but it's actually not useful.
Yeah.
Did you have a lot of that after your mother died? Do you mind me asking you questions, or do you only want to ask me questions?
No, that's okay. Did I have a lot of what?
Did you have a lot of people maybe sort of comparing their loss to yours, or not knowing quite what to do with the sudden traumatic nature of your mother's death?
Mm-hmm. I don't know, because I've actually had a couple close friends who have lost parents, and they lost a parent very like a lot younger than what I did.
Mm.
But I don't think I had anybody comparing that. I do remember, at the funeral and the wake and all that kind of stuff. It was the wake and all that kind of stuff. It was like, and this was well intentioned, and I'm not, people meant the best, and my mom was, there was a bunch of people there and all that kind of stuff. But there is only so many times that you can hear a person say, "If you need anything, let me know." And I'm like,
Yeah.
and a good friend of mine who lost his dad, he's like, I know what you like. I know that. I know there's only so many times you can hear that. He was like, when that happened with me, I just turned my phone off, because it was like, there's only so many times you can hear that, because there's not really much you can do. Like, I mean, nobody here in this realm of existence on this earth, there's not really anything they can do. Like you can't bring a person back. There's nothing you can do. But no, there was not a lot of comparing. But there was a lot of, I think people were trying to maybe understand, or people were trying to, just offer the support in the best way they knew how. The best, it's hard to, I mean, a lot of people experience grief, and I understand that. But for me, from my personal experience of it, it was like, the best way I know how to explain it was, I myself was picked up from a life that she existed in, and I was put into a life that she didn't exist in. It felt like I was taken out of this life and put into this life. I mean, that's what it felt like, overnight. Because it was just such a sudden traumatic change. And but no, I don't know. So I don't have that experience of comparing grief. But I do imagine that happens often, especially when people lose children.
Yeah. When, just out of curiosity, because I would love to know your thoughts on it now, so many years later, or a few years later, not so many years, but what do you think would have been useful for your friends to say, rather than, "If there's anything I can do, let me know"? Like, what do you wish somebody had said in those moments?
I have the answer for that, but I'm not sure I can answer it.
Okay. Are you getting emotional? Is it because it's like bringing up something for you, or?
No, I think it's just kind of what I told. I mean, it's basically the same thing that I told myself, that she was, because I actually had a good relationship. I was fortunate enough to have a good relationship with my mom.
Yeah.
And so I was very thankful for the 25 years that I had with her. And I knew that when she passed away, that I knew that she loved me. I loved her. I knew she was proud of me, and that kind of thing. For the longest time there, I had this, and I'm sure you hear this a lot, but I had this thought, I guess, that like there was just so much she was going to miss out on, because I don't have children. I'm not married. This was 5 years ago. A lot has happened in the last 5 years. I'm just like, man, she was there for me, and she supported me as a child, all this kind of stuff. And it's just not fair that she is not going to see the, whatever XYZ achievement that I have later on down the road. I remember that being like a very big obstacle, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, it was that on top of, obviously her not being here anymore and us not being able to spend time with her and that kind of thing. But I do remember that being a very, very frequent thought. But to answer the question, I think if somebody would have told me and there were people who did this, but I think if somebody would have told me, you know, she was really proud of you, she really loved you, you know, that even though people are not physically here with us, they're always with us, even if they're here in memory. I mean, they're with us. And, you know, even if we had, you know, as children grow up and they become adults, they take lessons that they learn from their parents with them. So even if like the lessons are still there, part of the person is still there. Like I don't know what the percentage is. Like you're so many percent of your parents to begin with just because of genetics, you know. So it's like the like
you're
the time
100% your parents because of genetics.
I mean, yeah. So it's like, but it's like you take these things, like it's like the memories and like knowing that was, you know, obviously I didn't have enough time with her, obviously, but it's like having that experience. I guess gratitude. I guess it comes out of gratitude, you know, which almost sounds, and like had I said this back then, you know, 5 years ago when this happened, I would really feel like shit for saying that, because it's like, oh, well, this should destroy me to the point where I can't think about this. But it's like, no, man, I'm thankful for the time that I had. You know what I mean? I'm thankful for the relationship that we had. You know, for the longest time, she was 25 years. She was a very big influence in my life.
Yeah. 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 It's, I mean, just like what you're saying, right? So she's with you right now. She's with us right now.
Mm-hmm.
Remind me of your mom's name.
Her name was Brenda.
Brenda. So, you know, Brenda's here because her DNA is in you. And also, like, the lessons that you learned are hardwired into your brain, right?
Mm-hmm.
You've got neural pathways in your brain that are there because she was your mom. She is stitched into you. No denying, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and there's something that's really wonderful and comforting about that, you
Mm-hmm.
know? I think sometimes people don't know what to say, which is why they say, if you need anything, let me know.
Mm-hmm.
And I would just say, so that I heard this story and I loved this. And I actually I'm not a celebrant. Like, I don't do funeral celebrations or life's whatever, a funeral celebration of life,
Right.
or whatnot. But I heard this amazing story of this celebrant who, whenever he does a funeral, and oftentimes, you know, because people don't, you know, where he is and whatnot, people don't go to church, you know, so he's celebrating and he's the officiant for a funeral of somebody that he doesn't know and a family that he doesn't know. So he sort of researched them and delivers a speech, etc. But the thing that he does is he gets matchboxes and he puts the face of the person who's died on the matchbox. And he gets a bunch of them and he tells people at the funeral to take one of those matchboxes and to put it in your junk drawer. And so when 3 months after the funeral, you're looking for matches to light that candle, you'll see that person's face. And he's like, that's your sign to reach out to that person now. They don't need you right now. Right now, they're in the thick of it. Right now, they're deep in the red tape of bureaucracy of it. They're like in the tsunami of it. But 3 months, 4 months, 6 months from now, when the rest of the world has already moved on and they're still in it, a phone call from you is going to make a huge difference.
Mm-hmm.
How are you? How are you doing with everything? Right? Not trying to fix, just saying, checking in, how are you? And I just love that. I think that's such a brilliant thing to do. Such a brilliant thing to do.
That is a really good idea, because I mean, you are right. You know, it's not like, I don't think the situation gets better as time goes on. I think you just become stronger. You just become better able to handle it. But it's like, you are right. You know, months down the road, when it's more of a real thing and the reality has set in, that like, this is how it is. You wake up every day and it's like this is real. It's not just a dream anymore.
Yeah.
I can see that being very beneficial for a person to get a random phone call, you know,
Or an email or a
yeah, or
text
something. I mean, you know,
thinking of you. Yeah. Yeah.
but you know, I remember too, like, cause I also lost my grandmother, not her mom, but my dad's mom, a few years ago.
Mm.
And so, you know, there was that, but I mean, every grieving experience is different, you know, but, I remember, man, in both of these situations, and this is why I say kind of outside. I don't want to go off on a tangent right here, but this is why I say on kind of outside of this topic that when you go through adversity, when you're going through something hard, there is a very valuable lesson to learn in that, because I learned a lot about myself through both of these situations. First of all, I learned how how it's better for me to handle problems, and everybody handles
Mhm.
problems differently. But I noticed I
Amazing.
learned
What a
how to,
gift.
yeah. I mean, not, you know, if I could go back in time, would I do it again? Well, you know, would I choose that? Obviously not. But since you're there, like, I'd be damned if I'm going to suffer or be in pain and not get anything from it. You know what I mean? So, but yeah, I learned that about myself, and that lesson has helped me a lot in the past
Mm.
5 years, especially with business, with career, with personal growth. I mean, that's just something that is something that I've taken and applied to that. Now, could that be a defense mechanism? Maybe. I mean, you know, I don't know. People, they say when people go through a traumatic event in their life, they change their hair or whatever it is. It's like there's these little cliche things that people do. Um, but I mean, if it serves you, if it serves you for the best, does it really matter? You know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's transformational. It changes who you are, right? So
Yeah.
your identity changes,
Hmm.
and the fact that you're like, wow, well, I can really use this. I think it sort of cracks people open to what's important.
Hmm.
Your priorities get realigned. You think of time differently. You think
Hmm.
about courage differently. You think about letting things go that don't matter
Yep.
differently. You think about, carpe diem, seize the day
Right.
differently, right? Um, so yeah.
But in your professional opinion, though, because I know that people are going to go through things like this and learn
Mm,
whatever it is about themselves, and they're going to feel guilty about that. They're going to feel like,
mm,
you know, this is not like, it's almost like you're taking a positive from a very negative situation, and I imagine people are going to feel guilty about that. You know, whether it's
mm.
going through the adversity and getting stronger from it, because grief is very different from any sort of other adversity that we can go through in life, because we're losing a person. You know, we're losing a person who meant a lot to us.
Yeah.
So it's not like, we say going through adversity, it's not like, oh, you started a business and it failed and you're going through that adversity and you're growing from that. Like, this is a separation of a person that you were attracted to. And so I would imagine that if a person is in that situation and they're learning, like I was learning about themselves, how they handle things, how they overcome things, I know that there is somebody out there who's going to feel guilty or shamed about that, because it's like, oh, well, if I feel this way, if I'm taking this and I'm going through this and I'm growing from this, I'm growing through this situation, that makes me feel, not me, but just in general, the person, whoever's talking,
Yeah.
makes me
Yeah.
feel like, you know, I'm not grieving this person. But
Mm.
am I making sense? Because
You are making sense, but I think that the thread that I want to pull at is using the word adversity around the death of a loved one, uh, because it's not adversity; it's inevitable. We're
hmm,
all going to experience it in our lifetime. So, adversity to me, at least, means that you're fighting against something that maybe is unfair. You're fighting against people who are trying to get in your way. Your, circumstances aren't aligning, but the death of a loved one is inevitable. It's not adversity.
but hang on, I don't mean to
So,
cut you off. I don't want to cut you off, but I think that's how a lot of people see grief, though. They see that it is something that's unfair, that's happened to them, you know, whether it was the person died from the hands of someone
Yeah.
else, or if it's just life, or they're just unlucky, or whatever it is. I think that's a big way that people see this, is that it's something
Yeah.
that happens to them.
Yeah. I mean, and I get that. But the reason why I want to just pull at that thread, and it kind of goes back to your question of like, if somebody's feeling guilty because they have come out of their relationship with the grief of the death of a loved one with better knowledge of themselves, more courage, more fire in their belly, that they feel guilty about that. I think language is really, really powerful. And the stories we tell ourselves and the language that we use in relation to what we're going through, what we're learning, what we're feeling is really powerful and can affect the way that we process things.
I
Right.
agree.
So I wonder if, like, I suspect that some of this has to do with the fact that you lost your mother in a very traumatic way, and that it's the trauma of how you lost her that is the adversity, as opposed to the fact that she died. Because at some point in your lifetime, she was going to die. You were going to
Right.
outlive her. Right. So it's sort of separating those two things. I think that the guilt, that actually is something that I do a lot of work with my clients, particularly those who had complicated relationships with their dead loved ones. Because once they're dead, the relationship, they feel like the relationship is stagnant, right? Because the physical person is gone. So the relationship is stagnant, but it's not true. Like we were just saying, especially if it's a parent, you're in there, you've got their DNA, but also you've got like neural pathways that are ingrained, embedded in your brain based on your relationship with this person. So they're with you anyway. But a lot of people feel like, well, I shouldn't be angry. Should is a terrible word.
Yep.
Because it's that comparison. I'm feeling this way, and I think that I should be feeling this other way. So I'm comparing myself to a standard that comes from where? Who knows where it comes from? Whether it comes from, your upbringing, or it comes from, a grandparent that said something to you, or a teacher that said something to you, or whatnot. Those sorts of things, I would just say, again, it kind of goes back to that idea that however you feel about the person who died is absolutely 100% correct, because it's how you feel. And if you try to deny how you feel about them, all you're doing is elongating your suffering. By acknowledging how you feel, by naming how you feel, you can let go of what you don't want to hold on to, right? Slough it away and take with you what you do want to take. So if you had a complicated relationship with, I'm thinking about one of my clients, really complicated relationship with her mother. Really complicated relationship with her mother. And the work that we did, she was able to be angry with her mother, be frustrated with her mother, be annoyed with her mother, be livid with her mother, and then feel it and let it go and move forward with loving her mother, missing her mother, and embracing the fact that her mother was human. It's okay to feel whatever it is you feel. I know that sounds like it sounds like a platitude, but it's so true. It's so true, right? And I think that like that's where I compare it to a beach ball. Grief can be like a beach ball that you're trying to hold underwater, right? Because you think, oh, I'm just going to hold it here. I'm going to hold it here. And then you have to make all of these micro adjustments to keep the beach ball underwater. And you're creating all of this tension because you're like, I shouldn't feel this way. I shouldn't feel this way. I shouldn't feel this way. And then when you finally let it pop up, it's completely overwhelming. But then there's like, There's that huge release of everything. And if you could
Yep.
just allow yourself to be in it. It's hard, it's scary, it's messy.
Yeah, and this is a really good point too, man, because I think by definition, if you resist something, by definition, it is there and you are trying to act like it's not.
Oh yeah.
Specifically
It
talk
gets
about an
bigger.
emotion.
It's scarier.
Yeah. Yeah. Because if you resist an emotion, by definition, that means you have the emotion and you're trying to do whatever, act as if, think as if, feel as if you don't have it, whatever. But it's like, I say all the time that an emotion can be something, it can guide you. It can show you a lot about what's going on. It can teach you a lot about whatever, either about yourself, about the situation you're in. I mean,
Yeah. It's
real
data.
simple example. Yeah.
It's
Real
data.
simple
Yeah.
example. So I have a business that I started when I was 20 years old, and I started it because I was, yeah. Well, I mean, I would just say the age is relevant. But I was, the reason I started it is because I had so many jobs, man. I was around all these people that had these jobs, warehousing, construction, whatever it was. But I just felt like I wasn't supposed to be there. I felt like I was supposed to be doing something else. And so that feeling, we talk about, we can talk all day about feelings and all that, but like, if it's there to show you a thing, to guide you, to show you what needs to be improved or changed or felt. And I agree. If you don't let yourself feel this and in this specific situation grieve, then it just, I think it, like you said, elongates it. It makes it worse. It makes it, because not only are you trying to resist the emotion and also grieve and also deal with the shame that you, I guess if you're resisting it, probably by extension, you're also ashamed that you even have the emotion to begin with. So there's just this cocktail of everything that's going on. But what I'm trying to lead up to here is
other things too, right? We know from scientific research that the body keeps the score. You try to not feel that anger, you try to not feel those things, then that emotion doesn't complete its cycle and it stays in your body and it turns into backaches and muscle aches and any variety of ailments because it's not being allowed to pass through the body.
Yeah, and I think what I'm trying to lead to here is I want people to hear that it is okay. Well, first, going kind of just to back up for a second, I want people to hear that it's okay to grow and improve themselves through this situation. Like you don't have to. I mean, it's even uncomfortable having this conversation because I know how, like, people that I know, that I've met, that I've talked to in similar situations. I know, like, everybody has their unique way of handling this, but it's like, it almost sounds like you're saying you don't care about this person when you say this. But I want people to hear that it is okay to improve and grow and learn through this situation. That's kind of the whole thing I'm trying to do here.
Yeah. And I think it's, so the coach in me wants to pull at that. I'm not going to pull at it too hard, but
pull away, man.
The idea that you should feel guilty for the gift of grief. I mean, I sometimes talk, I know people, talk about superpowers, but I do think that grief winds up being a superpower, in part because, like I said, once you've experienced it, and I really think that you can't quite fully empathize with someone until you have yourself gone through at least one major grief, right? But once you have, you can't unsee it. It's everywhere, right? It's, I mean, when you watch movies, I'm going to challenge you, Cody. Start watching movies, and I want you to start thinking, going, okay, how many characters in this movie are motivated by grief? What they're doing is motivated by grief. How they're behaving is motivated by grief. It's everywhere. It's everywhere. So I love that you learned about yourself, right? So clearly when you grieved the death of your mother, you took some time to reflect. You took some time to allow yourself to be with whatever was coming up for you, and took those gifts forward. And I would think of them as gifts.
Yeah,
that
is really interesting that you say that you label it as a gift, because, if I were to say that, or somebody in that situation were to say that, I think that would be one of the examples I'm talking about here, about the shame and the guilt. It's like, oh, well, you see this as a gift? What do you mean? What do you mean by that? But I think if a person says that, then I don't think they see the importance of what we're saying here. If you were to say, if you were to refer to it as a gift, I think they would be kind of missing that point, I guess.
Yeah. And it may be that the person, if you're thinking about somebody in particular, it may be that they just haven't experienced anything like this yet. Yeah. I mean, I don't think that it's so wrong to, I mean, like, I kind of don't like personally, I don't really like the looking for the silver linings, right? But like I said, grief is messy. It's a deeply, deeply human thing. And if you don't grow and you don't learn from it, you could get stuck in it. You could get really, really stuck. And if you're stuck in it, you're not fully living your life. And what a trying to find the right word, like, but how kind of awful is that too?
Right.
And it's deeply painful. I mean, I've had clients who came to me, 8 years, 9 years after somebody's died, and they're like, I haven't processed it yet. I haven't figured it out. I am struggling. I don't know what to do. And a lot of times it's loss that's piled up. So they think that they're stuck in one loss, but actually they're stuck in 3 losses behind that. And it's sort of like dominoes. If we can deal with that one and they can learn what they needed to learn, then they can apply it to all of the others. And it kind of goes.
Yep.
It's really interesting.
And so I think this leads us into a spot of the conversation where people who are stuck in this, whether it's been 6 months, 6 years, whatever it's been, people who are stuck in this, do you work with people on getting unstuck, on getting out of this sort of being stuck phase, whether it's a healthier way to handle it, or whether it's, processing what it is? Maybe it hasn't been processed. Maybe it's been avoided. I don't know,
A lot of it is, sort of what I was talking about with the transformation that you go through, and it's choosing what you're going to take with you. You talked about, like, I was in this one life with my mom, and then I was pulled out and taken and put in this other life without her. And then you're in this life without her now. And as you're going through the process, that world is changing, right? And you're changing too. So what are you going to take with you, and what are you going to leave behind in this place that you got dropped into? Right?
Exactly.
Because you don't want to take all of it with you. You don't want to take the suffering. You don't want to take the trauma with you, but you want to take the learning with you. You want to take whatever it was that cracked you open, made you more compassionate, made you more courageous, made you more, whatever. But it's choosing that. And people who get stuck usually are stuck in not allowing themselves to feel, because they feel shame, they feel guilt, or they're wanting to understand something that they can't get an answer to anymore because the person's gone. And they have to give themselves closure, and they have to accept the new reality, accept that world that they've been plopped into, so that they can then create the world that they want to live in, because you have agency. You have agency.
So you you made a really good point. So I got on my arm right here, I have a tattoo of a rising phoenix. It's a
Ooh.
phoenix, and he's coming out of the flames. And
Yeah.
the philosophy of the rising phoenix is that we are reborn from tragedy. We are reborn. To give another metaphor, sometimes you have to prune dead wood so that the new wood can emerge and be healthier.
Yeah.
And what I was trying to say earlier is that, before when I felt like I was picked up out of this life and put into another one. But it's like that person that I was in that life, that person in, flashback to whoever that person was. That was before the flames. That was before the dead wood. That was before the tragedy and the pain. And so it's like the way I see this, who I became in that process is the person who is capable of handling this because I handled it. And this is what I say. It's a little bit different when you talk about grief because it's such a painful thing. But as far as like tragedy, adversity, when you're going through this, man, and I would love to get your opinion on this. Because what I always tell people is if you're going through something, if you're trying to solve a problem, if you're trying to get through something tragic, don't just try to solve the problem. Don't just try to solve whatever it is. Be the person who can handle that. Be the person who can solve a problem, who can handle tragedy, who can overcome that. Because what you can probably guarantee, like you said, grief is probably inevitable for all of us. We're probably at some point to somebody going to experience this. We're certainly going to experience tragedy and pain and discomfort in life. But if you can become the person who is capable of handling this thing versus just solving the problem, when this happens, that's just going to be like that's something that you can do. I mean, forget down the road, forget being that like a problem solver is always going to have career opportunities, business opportunities. Like if you can solve problems for people, if you can help people overcome things, dude, that's like job security 101, I feel like. But just the rising phoenix going through that, like being reborn from tragedy. I don't know how else to say it other than I felt like I became the person who can handle that, Yeah. I mean, and that is, again,
and you didn't know.
I didn't know
until you went through it.
Right. But
Right?
it's like when you talk about, and this is why it really sparked interest in me when you said the gift of this, the gift of grief, because it's like, I don't know anything else in my life that would have happened that would have taught me that to the degree that did.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But like when I say these things, there's probably, I don't know, maybe there's a few people out there who would agree with this. Maybe there's some people out there who be like, dude, how can you say that about losing somebody? How can you focus on emerging from that and being a better person for that? But it's like, what is the alternative? I honestly don't know what the alternative is. What are we going to do here? What's the alternative to this?
The alternative is not doing that, which seems like a waste. I mean, it's funny, like the thing that I'm really interested in, and it's the thing that my films are about. It's the thing I'm working on a couple of different creative projects because I want to have conversations like this, right? And I want people to have conversations like this. And I want anyone, whether they've been through grief or not, to be able to be present with someone who is in pain. And it's hard. It's uncomfortable because, like you said, you want to fix. You want to be the problem solver. But you're wanting to do that because of your discomfort.
Right.
Not because of the suffering of the person in front of you. You're trying to fix your discomfort. And to just let that go. Because you can't. And more often than not, people don't need you to fix it. They need to be witnessed. They need to be heard. They need to be seen.
Yep. Yeah, I want to be very clear. I would never take that philosophy and apply it to someone else who is grieving. The way I'm. I mean, I just want to be very clear here. I would never have a person in front of me that is grieving and be like, "All right, man, get your shoes on, let's go." Like I would never have that. I mean, because that's, but also, first of all, there's several reasons I wouldn't do that. I mean, not only is it not productive and very disrespectful, but like this has to be something that you experience yourself. You know, this has to be something that you get to a point where I feel like you have handled this, you've felt this, you're at a point where you're ready to do whatever you need to do to progress from this. I mean, it has to be internal. It has to be. And I think the only thing that we can do is, like you said, be present with the person. You know, that's all we can do. I feel like as family and friends.
Like, honestly, it is an amazing thing because you, like, with the neuroscience of it, number one, right? Immediately you're sort of creating a connection with the other person because you're just, you're listening to them, and your neuro pathways and bandwidth are mirroring the other person, right? So you're connecting. And that actually, like, releases endorphins, it releases dopamine, it releases all of these wonderful things that make you feel better too. The person who's holding space for the other, right? And the person who is struggling and who is suffering is going to feel better too because of that connection that you have. It's a really,
100%.
it's a beautiful thing. Yeah, a really beautiful thing.
Look, I promised you a break that I'm well over. Sorry, I'm sorry. I promised a break. Let's do this. Let's take a break really quick, and then we'll come back. I do want to ask you when we come back. I think we've been talking a lot about like adults losing a person, whether it's a parent or a child or whatever it is. But I want to ask you if you work with parents who have a child who has lost a parent, like a child who has lost a parent. Like, what would your message to parents be who has maybe a young child that's lost a parent, or, you know, something like that, you know, a very young, you know, child who has lost a parent? How would you help the other parent help the child, if that makes sense? Cause I think that's something that a lot of times, you know, it's kind of hard to imagine that. It's kind of hard. Here I go comparing grief, like we were talking about, but I don't know. Well, yeah, I did, but no, because I mean, I think about it, man. Like, you just think about a child, and like they already don't understand the world the way that we do, you know. And it's just, I can't imagine what the I don't know. I don't even know how to imagine that. But anyway, I guess I'll let you comment on that. But I didn't want to get your opinion on that. But yeah, we'll be right back. Hang on just a second. Whether they were married or had a partner or whatever, you know, the husband or the wife or the partner passed away, and now the child is very young and doesn't have that person. So do you work with people kind of in that situation, maybe parents? Is there something that, I guess there's nothing really anybody can do, but what's your professional opinion or thoughts on that, or like, do you
So I personally have not worked with children with their grief specifically. However, given the fact that my nephew was 13 when he died, and he died on my daughter's birthday when she turned 7, and my nieces and nephews were small, I've been around children who were grieving the death of one of their own. So not necessarily a parent, but, you know, a family member, and a family member that was closer in age to them than the adults around them. And I think the instinct that many adults have is that they're going to protect their children from it, or they're going to protect the young ones from it and not talk about it. And that's basically like inviting an elephant into your room and then pretending it's not there. And kids are actually more curious and less emotionally attached to language and to things that are happening than we as adults are. So I remember when my father died, we had brought him home to die. It was sort of a catastrophic cascade of surgical failures and failing to thrive, etc. And we knew he was dying, and we brought him home, and he had about 6 days at home, and he was in our living room. We cared for him. We talked to him. We, bathed him and did all of these things. And my daughter was 3 at the time. And he died on May 4th, first thing in the morning. And all of us were very distraught and whatnot. But we kept my father with us for the whole day. They didn't pick up his body until the end of the day. Because we wanted to have more time with him. We wanted to be with him, etc. And I was just like, oh my God, I was so scared to tell my daughter that he was dead. And finally, so he died at like 7:30 in the morning. And I think it was around 3:00 that I finally was like, so I'm just going to do it, rip off the Band-Aid. And so I just picked her up and I was like, hey, I want to bring you over to Grad. He's gone. He's dead. And she was like, oh, okay. She's just looking at him sort of like, oh, okay. He looks like he's sleeping. And then she put her hand on his face and he was cold. And she was like, oh, he's cold. And then she pulled his blanket up. And I was like, okay. And then she was like, can I go play now? And I was like, fine. So it was sort of this weird thing. Like I was so worried about it. However, when they came to take his body away, this very nice young man came in and put him on a gurney and like wrapped him in this handmade quilt and everything. And he, really, really peacefully taking him away. And all of us are just kind of like, we've had the time to sort of let things out. But my daughter was like, where is he taking him? Like she got so scared of him being taken away by this stranger. And I was like, it's okay. So then I just explained to her. I think some of it is just being, in language that they can understand, right? So you don't have to go into a lot of, I say avoid euphemisms, right? He didn't go to the puppy farm,
Right.
right? Or he's not, I mean, I suppose if you believe it, he's in heaven, but just say, his body is gone. He's dead. I think it's important to have that language to be like, because it is inevitable. Death is inevitable. And be as simple as you can. You don't need to go into a great deal of detail, right? Brene Brown says, clear is kind. Be clear, be kind. And if I would say too, this was something that I said to a male client who lost his mother. And he basically was like, I don't want my family to see me upset. I don't want to cry in front of my wife. I don't want to cry in front of my children. And I was like, why? And he was like, well, because, I need to be strong. I need to be, I'm the man of the family. I need to let them know that I can handle this. And I was like, well, what if you model to them, especially because you've got 4 boys, that really sucks to lose your mother, and it really hurts, and that you're deeply upset and you miss her and you're really, really sad, and you're okay. You're okay with being sad. They don't need to fix you, right? They don't need to be worried about you. I think that's what you're trying to avoid, right? Having your kids worry about you. They don't need to worry about you, but what if you model to them that, like, my mom died and I miss my mom and I loved my mom and I'm okay, but I'm going to cry. I'm going to be sad. I'm going to not want to do stuff for a while because I'm just really sad. I miss her but I'm okay.
Yep.
I would encourage that.
I think that's a very powerful message for a man that's in that spot is because it's a much more powerful message than not feeling something and going through the motions versus feeling it being upset, being emotional, and continuing to do what you have to do. I mean, I think that's so much more of a powerful message, because it's like the expression of, being brave or courageous. If you don't feel fear, you can't really be brave if you don't feel the fear. But
Yeah.
if you feel the fear and do it anyways, then you're brave. And so I think it's a much more powerful message for your family to see that you are also emotionally hurt, but you're getting up every day and you're doing what you have to do, and you're there, and you're taking care of it. I think that's a much more powerful message.
Yeah.
And I think that's in my experience, that's definitely been the case with a lot of men, is that they don't feel that they can express that, or they express it in different ways. And of course, going back to the conversation we had earlier, when you resist the emotion or you suppress the emotion, and people I've talked to, my personal experience, it amplifies if you suppress it. If you don't let yourself feel it, at some point, your body is going to decide for you that it's time to feel it, whether that's a sickness, whether that's, whatever. So it amplifies itself. But listen, man, this has been a great conversation, and we could talk. I'm sure we could talk for hours.
We could.
Where can you be found? Do you have social media or website or anything, or do you have anything you
do. So my website is rachelfowlergriefcoach.com. I am on Instagram and Facebook as Ray Beagle, RAYE, Beagle like the dog. You can find me there. So those are the two best places. You can email me at rachelfowlergriefcoach.com. Yeah. So that's where you can find me.
Perfect. So one last question that I kind of ask everybody before we close out. If you had to share or kind of pinpoint one of the most valuable lessons you've ever learned, it can be from your personal life, if it's something you're comfortable sharing, if a client or something that you've learned, what do you think is one of the most valuable lessons that you've ever learned?
So this is something that actually I only learned 2 years ago. I am, I hope you can tell, I'm a very empathetic person, very open person. And I struggled with boundaries around my empathy. So I would burn out quite a bit because I'd give and not take. And I learned through some very, like, my own struggles, but then some of the struggles that my daughter has been through as well, how to look at different people and say, I am really sorry that happened to you. And I have compassion for you. And it's not my problem. I know that probably sounds like a very strange thing for a grief and loss coach to talk about at the end of your podcast, right? But I think that I do think that we as humans need to have some boundaries around our compassion. And it doesn't mean, it goes back to that fixing thing, right? That I can have compassion for you, but I'm not going to fix you. You have to do that for yourself, right? I'm not going to do your emotional labor for you. I mean, that's what I do as a coach. I help you do your emotional labor by guiding you and asking you questions and getting you to reflect on things and pulling at the threads of the language that you use. But ultimately, you are going to do that work. I'm not going to do it for you.
Well, even if you do it for them,
a grief and loss coach thing to say.
Well, no, it's not, because even if you do the work for somebody, it's not going to be the full work. It's not going to be permanent. It's going to be a temporary thing. I mean, I think that, like I was saying earlier, that kind of stuff has to be done internally, man. It has to be done internally. And also, not only do you have a family and you have other people that are, kind of depending on you, you have yourself. There's only so much, there's only so much we can give without it being draining and something that's gonna basically hurt us because we don't have enough to give out everybody. Like it's the whole theme of this podcast is a personal growth and self-improvement podcast. And it's very easy to look at that and say that that's selfish. A person's taking care of themselves, trying to improve themselves, trying to go to the gym, be fit, to watch their diet, read books, learn things. Like it's easy to look at this as something that's selfish, but it's like, if you're improving yourself, man, everybody that is connected to you is going to benefit from that. If you're taking care of yourself, if you have boundaries that you are strictly enforcing and that you don't let people cross those boundaries, you're protecting yourself, which means that by extension, you're protecting everybody that's connected to you, because these people, like you are a big part of these people's lives. And it's like, if we're giving everybody else in our life 10% because we're giving, the outside world 90%, I mean, how are we really taking care of those that are connected to us? So
it's not selfish. It's not selfish to have boundaries. It's really
absolutely not. No. In fact, I think more people need to reinforce boundaries. I think there needs to be more reinforcing boundaries.
I think so too. I absolutely think so too. I think that, the discomfort of saying no lasts for a moment, but the resentment that builds up if you say yes to everything lasts a long time. And that goes with, empathy, that goes with everything, for sure. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Listen,
before we wrap up, can I do one thing with you?
For sure. Yeah.
So this is something that we do in my family. I think you've got your Starbucks there, or you've got, your coffee.
Well, it's empty, but yeah. I got a bottle of water. I got some water.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So in my family, when we get together, and especially if it's for an occasion or something like that, one of the things we do is we say the names of the people who are not with us. So for me, it would be Michael and Ryan. For you, it would be Brenda. And we give a toast to the no-shows.
Okay.
So
also, I want to include my grandmother in that. Her name was Annie Mae. Annie Mae.
So Brenda, Annie Mae, Michael, Ryan, to the no-shows. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Hang out for just a second. I'm going to explain to you about the upload and everything, but I really appreciate your time. Really appreciate the insight. Hopefully this will reach the right person and they can, I'm just going to say it, they can improve themselves from this situation and they can grow through this situation. Cause I don't, after having this conversation, I mean, this is the beauty about this, man. This is the beauty about social media, connecting with people, especially like where I live at. It's a very small town, and it's very easy to be in that environment and say that you must think wrong because there's people around you that don't think the same thing that you do. But it's like, I think social media, one thing that it does do for us is it shows us that there are, just because people around you can't see a thing, and this goes for anything, especially like creating some sort of goal, a business, a career path, whatever. Sometimes people are not going to understand things the way that you do. In fact, if you're doing anything of significance in your life, probably most people in your life are not going to understand that thing. But I think just one of the beauties about social media is just to be able to connect with people, and if somebody hears what you say, somebody hears what I say, they resonate with that, they connect with that. And I mean, when you're grieving, man, knowing that somebody is there that experiences the same thing with you is everything. Because the last thing that you need when you're grieving is to feel like you're alone. Yeah. So
absolutely. That is so true. So true. Yeah.
So, but yeah, I'm going to close this thing out. I appreciate it. I appreciate your time, and I'll just hang out for just a second, and I'll tell you about the upload. But yeah, I definitely appreciate it.
Yeah, you're so welcome. Thank you.
Hey guys, I appreciate you tuning in today. If you enjoyed this episode, you can find more content at Pure Wisdom Podcast. This is on Facebook, Instagram, Rumble, TikTok, YouTube, Spotify, Amazon Music, and Apple and Google Podcasts. There you can like, share, subscribe, and we will see you next time.